We're excited to tell you about a program that we've developed and are going to be launching here pretty soon. Rich, to start, why don't we talk about why offer this program? Like, what about the state of the world makes this program something that people should take?
Well, we're calling it the Beautiful Futures Lab.
Yep.
And that actually, for me, that comes from a phrase that I say a lot, which is that the future is beautiful or there isn't one. It's a lot of challenges these days, political, economic, ecological. If we don't change something fundamental about the way we relate to the world and the way we act in the world, the future, there may not be one. So the future is beautiful or there isn't one. The first part of that phrase, the future is beautiful, refers to the fact that just because we have to change doesn't mean it has to be ugly, that it has to be hard. It's not about a big sacrifice or making compromises or suffering through scarcity or anything like that. The future can be beautiful. That's really the only way to have a future. So that's the idea behind this, is that there's rising challenges that are truly existential. And what that calls for in us is a fundamental change in how we perceive and feel and relate and how we live in the world. So that's what this is about. And that is the context for it. That's why we're doing this, to discover and to generate and to cultivate in ourselves and in our institutions and in our systems a deeper kind of intelligence that can help us address existential problems.
And what I love about your work is that it's really based on what we can learn from Mother Nature. Ecological or relational intelligence. Can you say a little bit more about like what that's all about?
Sure. I mean, I think relational intelligence and what I call ecological intelligence are basically synonyms for the same thing. That, I mean, I'm trained as an ecologist, and that means I study, birds and rocks and, rivers and things like that. But what I really study are the relationships between these things. But when you realize that, it's all nature's intelligence that's operating here, you realize that that intelligence, that creative intelligence that we see all around us in nature, nature's intelligence, the nature of the intelligence of the cosmos, really, that is accessible to us because we are part of it. Like all of our perceptual apparatus, all of the ways that human beings have evolved to make the world intelligible, to understand the world, they all come from that same intelligence. All of our intelligences ultimately are grounded in nature's intelligence. That's where it comes from. And so this is really just a way to take that seriously, to say that we can know that intelligence and it can be an ally. And that's what we draw on for the beautiful future. The beautiful future, it turns out, is going to require that we access the beautiful intelligence of nature.
And what are some of the things that nature has to teach us? Can you say a little bit about like what the pillars of your
Sure.
philosophy?
Sure. Well, I've spent a lot of time in nature, studying it, experiencing it, feeling it, ingesting it, contemplating it, and I think I've managed to distill this huge body of intelligence down to basically three principles. And the first one is continuity, and that has to do with really taking seriously that we are on a continuum of this intelligence. And the best way that I know to establish that is by telling the story of continuity. And if you trace that logic back through time to see what caused us to be that, what caused that, you end up back at the Big Bang eventually. And then suddenly, when you do this enough, and when you spend enough time just sort of in this humble contemplation of it, you really begin to feel that continuity. It becomes embodied. And so that's what nature can teach us. By the more we know, and this was the driving motivation behind everything I've ever learned, was I wanted to know more, because the more I knew, the more I felt connected, the more I had this deep and abiding sense of belonging to this intelligence. So continuity is one of them. The second one that I focus on is relationality itself. When you study the whole of nature, when you study how it creates, you realize that everything that it creates comes from relationship. And when you see that, when you ask questions about it, you're kind of forced to ask the question, well, what is right relationship? And it turns out you can know what right relationship is. And there are signals, there are signs that the world gives us when we're in right relationship. And it turns out they feel really good. They feel really empowering. And so that's the second principle is relationality. And then the third one is what I call entanglement, which is really another word for an activism. An activism is this emerging philosophy right now about how minds emerge from nature's relationships. As you think about these things and as you engage with nature, you begin to realize through continuity and relationality that your consciousness itself, your sense of identity, the voice that you hear in your head of that's yours actually emerges from this field of relationships. It's deeply entangled with it. So how we think and what we think of as the material world are inextricably entangled. And so these are the deep principles, but it takes a long time to sort of explore them, to hear the story of nature, to feel the right relationalities that we're a part of every day, and the wrong, or let's say not right relationalities. And then to understand that the most intimate thing about us, which is our sense of consciousness, our sense of self, is also inextricable from that intelligence. Like I can talk about this, conceptually. We can talk, and we can go on and on and on about all the evidence that's out there in the world that's pointing to this reality. And so that's what this is about. This Beautiful Futures Lab course is really an introduction to these three deep principles. And by the way, when we're going through all these principles, other concepts come into play. Things like narrative and fractals and cybernetics and what's going on with AI and neural networks. All of that stuff comes up too. So we're not only talking about those three principles, but those are the portals to get into the other concepts that we encounter every day. Sorry, I'm going on and on here.
No, that's great. It's super fascinating. And as someone who has studied polymathic intelligence in human form, I just think what a classic original take, but still a fresh take to learn what we can from nature itself. Polymathy is all about learning broadly and deeply. And yeah, I think in our society, in our modern society, somehow we've gotten kind of detached from nature, but there's so much we can learn from it.
I really want to learn how do you see this integrating or dovetailing with your work? Like, what do you see in your polymathic research that's resonant with what I've been talking about?
Hmm. Well, just continuing to learn, like not getting stuck in one rigid way of thinking, but there's a saying from the Tao Te Ching um that basically life is, and I'm gonna not get the verbiage exact, but that flexibility speaks of life, like a tree that flexes in the wind, but rigidity speaks of death. And so I think there's something
Nice.
like our consciousness needs to stay awake and it needs to continue learning and unlearning and relearning rather than getting stuck. And so I think
Mhm.
that kind of resonates with some of what you were talking about. And I think nature is very complex and interrelated. And we have in the modern world, we've made silos and industries and departments, and we've sort of
Disciplines.
fractured,
Yeah.
yeah, we fractured knowledge. And now, I mean, I personally think the age of specialization caused a meta crisis, a global meta crisis, because whole industries didn't and whole nations didn't really think about cascades and domino effects. Everyone put their blinders on. We were literally told, put your blinders on, focus, specialize, be expert. But what that really meant is be robotic, cage your consciousness, be controllable and stop seeing the whole picture. And nature itself is complex and interrelated and a whole thing. It's even at who knows if it ever ends.
Yeah.
That from what I can see about Mother Nature is that complex systems exist nested inside other complex systems up and down. The human body itself,
Totally.
is Mother Nature, right? And more than half of the DNA in my meat suit is not my DNA.
Mhm.
Like even my body is a whole universe. Our internal mind space is, got lots of different parts, internal
Yeah,
family systems.
you see, you're inherently talking about all these things. You're talking about the continuities, and you're talking about the entanglement there when you talk about the mind. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really excited to discover the resonances.
Yeah, I mean, I think this will be the first time that anyone's ever connected ecological intelligence with polymathic intelligence, but I think there's a lot of overlap and a lot of interrelation there. And one of the things that really matters to me as well is um, I want to offer something practical and powerful. And so I really love this idea of like learning about ecological intelligence and then applying it to real world challenges. And that's what this program, maybe we should talk about that next
Yeah.
is,
So, how do you think, how is that going to be designed into the course itself?
yeah, so what people can expect from each from the program is we would meet periodically and we would learn about a pillar or a tenet of ecological intelligence. We'd have a discussion about it. And then we would have what I call a Polymath Laboratory session. And so what that is one person sharing a challenge, very briefly, like a challenge, a problem they are not quite sure how to resolve. And then I would facilitate a group discussion with different people there, bringing different disciplinary lenses, different backgrounds. And you, of course, bringing the ecological intelligence lens. And through the power of questions, we would help the person with the problem really think expansively and holistically and
Mhm.
learning from Mother Nature to
Mhm.
come up with a practical game plan. So every person in the program would walk away with a very customized plan for how to address a problem they're facing at work or in their life. And so this laboratory that I've created is a way to do that in a practical way.
Great. I love it. Sounds like it integrates really well.
Yeah. And it might be helpful too for anyone who's interested in potentially taking the program if I review kind of the learning objectives for the
Yeah.
program. Like, so the learning objectives for the program are as follows. By the end of the program, participants will understand the core principles of ecological intelligence with Dr. Rich Blundell, who's an expert in it. Recognize how those principles apply to human relationships, work, and decision making. Participants will experience what it feels like to think with nature, not just about it, but like thinking like nature thinks. Learn a disciplined, inquiry based approach to complex problem solving, which is that Polymath Laboratory I talked about, and gain practical movement on a meaningful life or work challenge. It's very customized to what you're facing. Develop greater relational awareness and systems literacy, and build trusted relationships with other thoughtful humans. So I'm really excited to offer this program. I think it's going to be a good experience and really insightful and personally powerful for what people can get out of it.
If I
It
might just broaden that out a little bit to say, and this goes back to the existential crises that we mentioned at the beginning, that dealing with these crises and sort of growing and surviving them and thriving through them is going to require like deep new sources of intelligence.
Mhm.
And that's a kind of leadership. And so what I'm hoping is that people will come to this from different disciplines, with their own expertise. But through this process of coming to understand their life and their work in the context of nature's intelligence, they will update their expertise to deal directly with those existential problems. That's how we're going to get out of this mess. And this way of understanding and relating to the world is the necessary intelligence for dealing with this crisis. So that's just another thing that I hope people will get out of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I should mention that it is an online program, but there is an optional in-person residency with Dr. Blundell. Do you want to speak about that, and just in case anyone decides to sign up for that as well?
Sure. Well, the idea here is that what I'd like to do is, because, we can do this virtually and we can get deep conceptual engagement, but I also want to be able to offer people the phenomenological engagement, the lived experience in the real world with nature, feeling and being with and do things in the real world that really reveal and embody this intelligence. So for people who go through this course, the Beautiful Futures Lab, with you and I together, they'll have an opportunity to, if this resonates with them, they can join that cohort as well, and that'll be later this summer. I've done this kind of thing in the past, and it's quite profound when it works.
I bet it is. Sounds like a really enriching, immersive experience.
Yeah, it is.
Well, spaces are limited. I think it's going to be a really great program that's practical and fresh and insightful. What, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, okay. So to learn more, people can go to thebeautifulfutureslab.org, which will have information and links also to your website, which will be
drangelaMyers.com/beautifulfutureslab.
okay. So yeah, I guess that's the way to learn more and sign up.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Angela.
Thank
Hmm.
you.